And it's rolling. And now we are live.
Hello.
Hi, Dean.
How's it going?
Going pretty good. And hi, audience. This is Keystroke Medium. We are doing another Meet the Author interview. And today we are meeting Dean Floyd. He is an urban fantasy writer. And he writes books like one of my all-time favorite series that has Harry Dresden Files. You have your Luck series.
I do.
I had a brain freeze, and all I can remember is Luck because that's like on all your covers. What's the name of that series?
I should have just named it the Luck series because that's even how I refer to it. But it's called the Shamrock Samurai series.
Well, but that's
I wouldn't.
cool.
Thank you. I wouldn't claim to be anything like Jim Butcher, but I was definitely inspired by him and a little bit of the Devil May Cry video game series. So yeah, that's my series, and we could talk more about that later if we want.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and talk. What are some of your favorite writing inspirations, like authors, book series, maybe TV series? What are the things out there in the ether that kind of get into your writing?
Well, as far as authors go, I'm kind of an old soul, so I like your Edgar Rice Burroughs, your Robert E. Howard. I like old Sword and Sorcery, planetary romance. Newer authors, I guess would be like Ursula K. Le Guin. I love her Earthsea trilogy is and I know there's more books, but the original 3 are my all-time favorites. And let's see, I feel like I'm forgetting somebody big. Oh, C.S. Lewis, of course.
Yeah, we all love C.S. Lewis. Well, I mean, not everyone, but
most of us, the cool kids.
Especially around Christmas time, we think of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yes.
And the winter that never ends until Aslan comes.
He's coming.
Yeah. So you write urban fantasy with your Shamrock Samurai series. And what else do you write?
Well, this year I've delved a lot into short stories, just kind of went head first. Speaking of C.S. Lewis, and to give another podcast a shout out, I wrote a Lewis meets Lovecraft short story for a podcast called Between Lewis and Lovecraft, which is on their 13th episode. You can go check that out. They read it at the end. So I write weird stuff. I really like dark kind of horror vibes sometimes, especially when it comes to like tone and setting. Batman, the animated series from the 90s is a big influence on me just visually. And then other stories I've written obviously the space opera for this Reach anthology, and that was actually my first space opera I ever wrote. So thank you guys for putting the challenge out there. That was a lot of fun. And then I dabble in sword and sorcery fantasy. Nothing published yet, except for in the Kingdoms in Iron Stone anthology. So.
And then what got you into writing?
Oh, okay. So I've always been a storyteller ever since I was a kid. When I was a kid, my main creative outlet was drawing. So I would sketch and draw from as early as I can remember all the way through high school. And I could never draw a character without creating a story about them. So I've always been a storyteller. Later in life, I was part of a amateur sketch comedy group for about 13 years. And I got my story outlet, my creative juices flowing through that on a weekly basis. So yeah, I've always just been a storyteller. What got me into writing was over the last couple of years, I just joined the 20 books to 50 group and was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write some books and I'm going to have fun. So yeah, that's what got me into writing.
How did sketch comedy help you to think about stories and help you develop your story crafting skills?
A lot, actually. Probably the biggest way is that at some point I became the leader of the crew, and I challenged us to never write the same thing twice, never perform the same skit twice. And we did this for years, weeks on end. And we would do it once a week. We would perform once a week. And probably the biggest thing that taught me was showing up and spending the time to think out your story and what we were gonna perform. Like get in the chair and do the work.
Right.
And then also how to think of like creative story ideas on the fly, because a lot of times in those scenarios you're somebody will say a line that's not, they'll ad lib and then you have to ad lib along. And that's when it gets really exciting because you're creating in the moment. But you wouldn't have gotten there unless you did the hard work up front of, making a framework for the story to live in. So, ad lib and just showing up to be creative.
Did that help you to develop characters with unique voices? This idea of spontaneously coming up with an idea and spontaneously coming up with responses to stimuli. Does that build characters?
So a couple of times I was asked to do like a roast for some friends. And the funniest one I ever did was for my brother, who's exactly the opposite of me in every way. We have no similar interests at all. And we're best friends, but we're total opposites. So I did a character in-depth study on my brother. And I looked at the way he moved, the way he talked, the things he said, little nuances. And I had somebody in the skit who knew both of us. Somebody watching the skit later said that at one point I came out and they thought that my brother interrupted his own skit. And I know that's kind of a lame example because I look like him, right? But what that taught me was the value in watching people and being kind of a people person and just looking for those nuances in a person's character that sets them apart from everybody else.
Well, to be able to observe him, I mean, he's your brother, but to be able to observe him that closely and to know him so well that people actually thought you were him, that's on, a whole new role. And then when you come up with your characters, so what are some of your characters like? What are some characters that end up in your book?
My characters are very goal-driven, action-oriented, and they usually have struggles, blue-collar struggles. I live a blue-collar life, and I draw heavily on that. I've worked a lot in a warehouse. I've worked around people in refineries, so I kind of lean into that actually and let that come through in my writing.
Yeah.
And I think that lends itself to down-to-earth characters that most people would relate to.
Well, I know Harry Dresden in the Harry Dresden Files is like that. And the Shamrock Samurai series, it looks like that. Like, looks like that kind of guy on your cover. And I know your fantasy short story, and the space opera, those were your main characters. They also have a lot of humor. How do you incorporate humor into your books?
You'd think that as somebody who did sketch comedy for as long as I did, that it would come really naturally, but it's a totally different medium. So like when I'm writing a joke to perform, I'm thinking of the way I'm gonna perform it, right? So that comes across like way different in writing. And some of my earlier writing, like I would give it to my wife to read, and she's like, "This isn't funny at all." But why? So that's actually been a challenge. But I do like to incorporate humor. I think as it is, like I try to laugh at things a lot, especially challenges. Like I think it's better to look at life and look for the humor than it is to look for all the things you could be down about. So right. I don't know if I answered the question. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to be honest, to add humor into my writing, but yeah.
Do you have certain characters that are funnier than others, or make certain kind of jokes, like a character that does puns a lot or something like that?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple characters. So in my I actually got this from Martha Carr. Me and her had a talk at 20 Books, and I was asking her how I could kind of bring some life into my Shamrock series, and she said, "Oh, you need to have like a lovable, goofy sidekick character that follows the main character around just to be comedic relief." And I was like, "Oh, that's like a no-brainer. That's genius." So I have this hobgoblin shapeshifter character that he solely exists just for the laugh, and like that's kind of he knows that. So it's kind of a little breaking the fourth wall. And he's a ton of fun to write because he can look at any situation, no matter how dire it is in the story for my main character, and crack some joke about it. And when he does have a serious moment, it lends itself to the weight of what's actually happening. So
I know Shakespeare used humor a lot when his story is getting heavy. He used comic relief. How do you use humor to kind of balance off the darker moments? I know you said you wrote horror. Maybe comedy comes in horror too. How do you balance that out? How do you know when to use humor, when not to?
I think humor is when the story for me is getting a little dry and I need a surprise and I need to shift the emotional tone a little bit. Humor is a good to move from, like, say something that's really serious and sad to something that's like more melancholy or happy. Humor is a good like a good beat in between those emotions to kind of bridge the gap. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so you might have a scene where someone gets bad news, or where the stakes just got raised because something bad happened, and then you might have the characters, that one character who always makes the joke. He comes out, with that gallows humor kind of thing.
Yes.
Response to what they just learned. Speaking of, we had Rick Partlow point out your Lincoln beard already.
Thank you. Yeah, I got a cross between Lincoln and Professor X going on. So
got the Lincoln beard and the lumberjack shirt.
Yes.
Didn't he like chop logs? Isn't that part of the legend?
Yeah, and he hunted vampires.
Vampires, yeah, with stakes, which you have to chop first and then whittle and then use. Yeah. Rick also points out you've got no mustache going.
That is true. I just recently shaved it off. Sometimes my wife likes it. Sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes I like it a lot. Sometimes I hate it. So this is one of those weeks where I was like, I don't want mustache in my pie. So
hey, that's a good call. Yeah.
Right? Or eggnog. I don't want eggnog in my mustache this week. So
right. Yeah, that's smart. All right. Now, Luke, he mentioned earlier when we were talking about thinking on your feet. He says he's not strong at thinking on his feet. And I feel the same way. As a writer, I'm a really slow writer. Yeah, I take my time. But I know with you're doing comedic sketches and then also becoming a writer, you've probably had to think a lot, work on spontaneous thinking on your feet, and also bringing in humor. So what advice do you have for authors who maybe are slower or who struggle with thinking on their feet and or incorporating humor?
I think parameters are really important. When you have a deadline to perform live in a week, it helps you to put in the work. And like I said earlier, I'm just sorry if I'm repeating myself, but like putting yourself in that framework of, okay, here's the story we wrote and we can deviate from this, but it's got to come back. I think it's a skill that it can be honed, it can be practiced, but you have to be willing to practice it in public. That's the only way to really kind of get like that. And I'm sorry if you can hear my kiddos screaming in the background.
That's awesome. We want the whole
raw package
experience. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Hold on a second. It's getting crazy back there.
So probably putting in the work every day is part of it.
I think you can give yourself a framework to. It's hard to be ad lib when there's no focus for the story, right? If you don't know where you're going with the ending, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what's appropriate to throw in as ad lib. Yeah.
So are you a plotter then, or a pantser who plots a little?
Yeah. So I'm in like a transition phase right now. I'm trying to be a plantser. So I've heard people throw that around before. I used to outline heavily. And some people like Steve Boyer would probably still consider me a heavy outliner. And I agree with everything Josh says about outlining. But I found that it just like takes me way too long. I'm stuck in that phase for like way too long, more than I'm comfortable with. And so I'm trying to give myself some of that creative freedom where, okay, look, I have a framework. Now let's ad lib a scene in that framework and kind of drawing on those sketch comedy skills that I learned.
Rick says, plantser fasciitis.
Rick, gotta love him.
So you have the general idea of the story written down, or at least in your head, and then you get started with a chapter or scene. And then, then about how long does it take you to finish whole book?
Um, let's see. I can finish a 45,000 word book in about 18 days,
Whoa.
but with the caveat that it takes me a whole month. So there's like sporadic days that I can't write throughout the week, usually because work interferes or kiddos and family, getting sick, things like that. This year I've had a lot of health issues. I've had some surgeries. So I can't write every day, and that's just something I've had to accept. But I try to get up and write every day if I can. But I'm actually, lately I've been trying to slow down a little bit and write a cleaner draft, because that's, when I was writing those that fast, I was writing really sloppy drafts. So now I've taken a page out of the old Steve Bollier book and started onioning and cycle editing or cycle drafting, whatever you want to call it. And obviously Dean Wesley Smith talked about that a lot at this last 20 books. But that has been a huge like eye opener for me. Like, hey, I can have the scene I wrote today can be clean, and I can leave it knowing like I feel good about that. And if I want to go back and add stuff, that's fine. But I know that it's like I'm not a hot mess when I come back to it.
So what do you mean by onioning for people who are like still learning these terms?
Sure. So what I do now is, after I've outlined, right, and I know where my story's going, I sit down to write my scene. And I write a little bit, probably like 250 to 500 words. And then I write until I get stuck, or until the words feel like actual work. And then I go back to the top of that section of words there. And I go back through and I just start polishing it and making sure I have the correct word choice. Spelling's all good. Did I say what I meant? Did I have good transitions between paragraphs? Was it clear? Was it as concise as it could be? Those sorts of things. And then once I'm done with that, that usually gives me a fresh idea of like, oh yeah, this is where the story's going. And now I'm going to continue forward another 500 words or so, and just kind of keep that cycle going.
Yeah, and it would probably keep your brain active and creative as you're kind of adding in stuff. You might think of a new joke or think of a new situation that you can kind of put in.
Yeah.
Do you find that throughout the day you're still thinking about your story, or do you get ideas at night? Like
sometimes. So I actually don't think about my story a lot during the day. I'm a very kind of like, I have to hone in and focus on whatever I'm doing. And kind of give that my full dedication. So I've really inspired by all of Chris Fox's books on writing and just kind of like turning the creativity on in a moment. So I usually just sit down and boom, that's like, I'm all there. I'm 100% there. I'm not thinking about anything else. It's just me and the story. So no, I kind of regulate the creative time to the creative time, and I don't really worry about it the rest of the day.
So when do you write? Like what time of the day?
So inspired by the guys here, Scott and Josh, I started getting up at 4:30 this year so that I could get a few hours of writing in before work starts, because I have a full-time day job. And then after that, it's kind of whenever I can fit it in. So a lot of times on my lunch break, and then rarely now do I write after work, because I like to save that time for my family and for dinner time and other things that need to get done. But if I need to, and I need to cram some extra words in, I do that after the kids go to bed. So I'm kind of like right whenever I can, but there's a for sure dedicated time in the morning.
Well, it sounds like you're kind of compartmentalizing, which allows you to focus on what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Distracted. I know some authors struggle with the feeling of when you're writing, you feel bad that you're not with your family or working on the job. And then when you're with your family or working on the job, you feel bad that you're not writing.
Yeah.
Ends up meaning you feel bad all the time. That's not
right.
Good.
Yeah, that was me up until like this year. Like I hadn't, for me, like managed my time wisely. So I was, getting irritated with my family for wanting to spend time with me. And that's stupid. Like I need to be able to find a way to have a family and enjoy writing. So for me, that was, well, nobody in my family's waking up at 4:30 a.m. So I'll just do that. So just time management. That was a big, huge growth moment for me this year.
What helped you flip the switch?
Oh, I think, yeah, I think it was that. And then also just like, just a little bit of seeing how fast everybody else puts out work, puts out books and like, man, I'm still on the same series. It's been like 2 years and I really want to be done with this series and move. I have other stories to tell. I always have more stories to tell. So I think that was kind of the catalyst, was Like I needed to kick myself in the butt and stop blaming other people for why I wasn't getting writing done, and take a hard look in the mirror, to quote Michael Jackson, and make the change.
Authors out there, well, hopeful authors out there who haven't started writing, but they're thinking about it and they know they've got a lot going on. They've also got their full-time job. They've also got their family. They've got their also responsibilities. What advice would you give them for starting out getting their book written and done?
I would say to get your book written and done specifically, I would say have fun. Have fun. My first few books, I was worried about like, oh, I got to be the next Brandon Sanderson. I have to put so much thought into this, and like my craft has to be excellent. And that really held me back from writing both what I wanted to write and from even finishing. So like I was locked into like, I got to write epic fantasy because that's all I read is epic fantasy. But then once I actually asked myself, what would I have fun writing right now? Oh, I just want to write Devil May Cry fan fiction, and I don't care if that's cheesy, and I don't care if people look down on that. That's what I'm going to write, and that's what's going to bring me joy right now. So I wrote that, and that evolved into my Shamrock Samurai series. And just that, like, getting over the fear of, like, oh, I have to be like somebody else or I'm not good, right? That's the lie, is you are never going to be Brandon Sanderson. I'm never going to be Brandon Sanderson because Brandon Sanderson already exists. So you got to be the best version of you that you can be as a writer. Look at your influences and understand where you, what you're drawing from, and acknowledge that and be fine with that. It's okay to have influences, but then go off and do what you're going to do, right? Write the stories you want to tell and have fun. I think I was early on was like stressing out so much about that I never got anything finished. I would start a lot of projects and I just, that's not the case anymore though.
So now you're focusing on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Whether it's actually your day, thinking about what you're doing with your day, but also with one project at a time. So when do you see the Shamrock series wrapping up, and then what do you want to do next?
Good question. I'm glad you asked. So if you boys and girls out there are good, you might get a Christmas present, and I might wrap up the Shamrock Samurai series this week. So I just penned, wrote, typed, whatever you want to say, the last chapter of the last book this morning. So yay! It took way longer than I wanted, but hey, it's a good day. It's a Christmas present to me. So
Yes.
yeah. So I cycle edited it. I'm feeling pretty good that it's a clean draft, but I do want to go over it a few more times before I hit publish. So maybe. So keep your eyes peeled, folks.
So you're hoping to publish that by tomorrow or by
later this week. Yeah. Hopefully before the new year. I need to count it as 2019 done, in the bag.
And that's the final book in the series?
It is for now. It's definitely the end of an arc. I had planned to do like 21 or 25 stories in this, and I think I have enough ideas to do it. But let's be honest, like it's not paying the bills yet. So I'd like to try other things too. There's a ton of other ideas I have kicking around that I'm really excited about, and I've been working on this one for just a little too long. It's overstayed its welcome a little bit. So I'm ready to kind of try something new.
You're excited for what's next.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Shadow the illustrator says, good job.
Thank you, Shadow. Appreciate the support.
So what genre or kind of story do you want to tell next?
Man, I'm really like having a toss up between writing this space opera story was really eye-opening for me because I realized like I don't read a lot of space opera, but I took like an inventory of like all the space opera I've consumed, and it's actually like a ton of different intellectual properties and shows and mangas and what have you. And I realized like, oh, I'm a way bigger fan of this genre than I even realized. And it was like a real breath of fresh air for me. So I might take the story I wrote and kind of spin that into a series. I don't know. But I think that would be a lot of fun. I've also been really itching to do a John Carter of Mars-esque planetary romance or science fantasy mix. But I also want to consider, what of my interests are marketable right now. And I see that becoming marketable in the foreseeable future with, there's whatchamacallit just came out. What's that new show on Netflix that just The Witcher, and Elric might get a show that's in the works. So Sword and Sorcery is making a comeback, I think. And I think in the next few years we're going to see that And Sword and Planet stories they're what's next, if you ask me. I could be totally wrong, but that's okay. I'll eat crow later. So,
well, of course, Dune's getting made into something right now.
yeah.
In a year, is that a book or a TV series? But Kevin J. Anderson's been talking about that. It's in the works.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest, but I heard about it as well.
So Dune that's science fiction, but it also has a feudalistic kind of society too.
Yeah.
Not exactly sword and they're not
Sorcery.
used to sword and sorcery type stuff in space. So let's go back to your space opera story that you're thinking of turning into a series or at least a book, based off of or kind of spawned off of that. Where did you come up with that story first?
Wow. So I actually did some digging and I found this document a year ago. Mm-hmm. And I had seen one of Justin Sloan's book covers, Project Exodus 2. And it has like a picture of a dude in like a exosuit, and he's got this cool gun and like a heads-up display. And he's in this futuristic city, and it looks like there's some rain falling. And I thought, like, I don't know why, the first thing I thought was, how cool would it be? Like, what if that guy was not holding a sword, but like some kind of laser, or not holding a gun, but some kind of laser sword, and he was like some kind of futuristic assassin. So I never actually read the book. Yeah. Sorry, Justin, but that actually was like the seed, and I logged that away in a document, and I forgot about it. I forgot about it for a whole year, and that kind of just marinated in my subconscious. And then when you guys asked me or put out the call to, not like you asked me personally, when you guys put out the call to for the submissions, my brain just instantly, like I didn't even remember that I was inspired by that. My brain just instantly went Space Ninja.
Yeah.
So, but then what I did from there was I just, like I said, I took inventory of all the things I like, and I just kind of cherry picked different ideas. So a lovable loudmouth animal from Guardians of the Galaxy, plucked that. A little bit of anarchy biker gangs from Akira, plucked that out. A little bit of blue collar setting, a refinery, kind of plucked that out of my own life, and just various places, and kind of took small elements from each of those things that inspired me, and kind of threw it in the melting pot and saw what happened.
Evil, wealthy overlord in charge of the person.
Yeah, which is funny because, like, I don't hate capitalism. I live in America, right? So,
sure.
America. But in the story, for the sake of the story, it made sense to have an evil capitalist overlord.
Right.
Which looks like that could be the way the future goes anyway, with, Google and all that jazz. So, but not to be bleak or anything, but oh, and what else? Oh, so weird, fun fact. There's a talking dog character in the story, which I love.
He's my favorite.
Awesome. So this may surprise you, but when I wrote that character, for whatever reason, the voice of Jason Sudeikis from Saturday Night Live was like the main inspiration. So for everybody that wants to go read the story, when you find that character, just imagine Jason Sudeikis as a little talking dog. And hopefully that makes the story a little more fun.
Yeah, we've got a lot of anthropomorphic animals, animal characters, humanoid animal characters.
Yeah.
Did they all come from Rocket? Cartoon creature from?
No, so I had made a Pinterest board when I was getting ready for the story, and I like to do that. I like to make like a Pinterest board and kind of get all my visuals lined up. And I had come across a picture of like this humanoid shark, and I already knew I was going to have this dog character. So I was like, why don't I lean into that? Why don't I go full on, make that a whole subsection of the story, and kind of live there and see what it would be like for these uplifted animals in the future who are, they're uplifted by society, but then they are automatically put at the bottom of society, in this class system. And I thought that was an interesting place for these characters to kind of live.
Right. Well, I like how you kind of emphasize their animal qualities and how that plays into their personalities and conflicts amongst each other, just like animals do, like on a barnyard.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun because, like, the animals, like, whatever animal I chose, like, it lent itself to the personality. And so for some of them, I tried to like twist it and add just a little something extra than what would be obvious. But for the other ones, some of the mech pilots, I really just leaned in and like, well, obviously the shark guy is going to be like crazy and a loudmouth because he physically has a loud mouth. So, and then the rat's going to be like, he's going to be the guy with the short guy syndrome. So he's going to, be real talkative and real kind of in your face, and be a little slimy. So that was fun.
All right, the chat's pretty excited about your animal character. Shadow says, finally, not a talking cat. Dog.
Yes, amen. Cats can die. No, I'm kidding.
And Rick, he says, I have a robot dog in my Bounty Hunter series. That's true.
Awesome. Named Dog.
Yeah, talking
That's
AI
awesome.
dog.
Is dog like an acronym for something, Rick? Like DOG?
That was cool. So where would you take the story next in a novel or a series?
Ooh, well, without spoiling too much, the main character has had an emotional dampener chip lodged in his brain for some time, and at the end of the story, he loses that. So now his desires have kind of come back full-fledged, and he's his own person again. So I'd really like to explore that. Like, what's the fallout of having an emotional dampener in your brain for your whole life and experiencing like full-fledged emotions for the first time. He also, I hinted at a love interest that go see. And he's a clone. So, which is not a huge spoiler. That's part of the story too. So all those things kind of lend themselves to, I think, kind of an interesting character that I could explore for a while. So I think he's going to go on a journey to go find his missing love interest.
So this story will act as the prequel to something bigger, or could
potentially, potentially, or it'll go nowhere.
Well, I like this story because it had all these fun elements, especially like the animal people. I thought were a lot of fun. But you said the mechs. It had the bike race. It had the space ninja. But it had a complete story that did have possibilities for what's going to happen next, and it left me with a very satisfied feeling at the end. I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much. That's awesome. I was I really wanted it to be self-contained, but I love stories that like I mentioned this, like I'm not nihilistic, so like I really like stories where the main character accomplishes their goal and then they live on to fight another day, and you know that as the reader, it's not ambiguous that they're living on to fight another day.
Sorry.
Am I? That was weird.
The wrong button.
That's okay. So I wanted to make sure that the ending was contained and that the main character accomplished his goal that he set out to in this story, but leave it open-ended, so that whether or not I ever write anything, the reader gets to imagine what happens at the end afterward.
So how do you balance out wanting to have a resolution to the conflict and wanting to have leave the reader feeling satisfied about this particular story, but also leaving the window open to opportunity for more, and leaving the window open for their imagination to kind of fill in what could happen next?
Sure. So I think with like a short story or a novella, you got to give your character like a smaller, more manageable goal that can be accomplished in a finite amount of time. And it's not a huge save the world goal. It's like his goal in this one is go sabotage these mechs. That's your goal from his boss. And so that's all he had to accomplish. That's the promise that I gave the reader, was there's going to be a showdown between an awesome space ninja and some talking animals in mech suits, and they're going to fight. And as long as I accomplished that, and that was the focus, and I didn't let the story meander, then hopefully it ended up satisfying. And thank you for saying that it did. And then anything after that is just like icing on the cake. And so I did give him a somewhat vague, but also kind of clear goal of where he's going next. So I think that's the best way to juggle it, is give your character a somewhat small, manageable, not save the world goal, and then give them like kind of like let them level up and progress to another goal that's a little bit bigger, a little bit harder.
Watch. Now someone in the audience, some fan out there is going to watch this video and they're going to be like, I can do it. I can make a save the world goal happen in a short story. Just you.
Yeah, you probably can. Go for it. Make me eat crow. So that's fine.
I think though that you're probably right. Is like the more focused your conflict is at the start, and the more that your short story can kind of focus in on that one thing, then the more likely you can kind of resolve it at the end, but still have flat threads that continue to trail off into after the story's over. But
yeah,
you're right. Someone else, maybe they can prove us wrong. Try it. We'd love to read the results. Share it on the Keystroke Media Facebook group. We'd love to read it. That'd be great.
That'd be fun.
All right. So we're getting close to, I don't know, we've been going for 36 minutes. That's pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's great. Do you have any
final
words for new authors who are, wanting to start their writer's journey, or they're pretty young on it and they're learning stuff?
Yeah. Stay humble. Go out there, know that you don't know how to write. That's okay. Not all of us are born with a writing talent, but if you put in the work and you look for help, it's out there. We're in the age of the internet, so a lot of the help is out there for free, like Keystroke Medium putting on this show every week, week after week after week. And from there you can connect with other people. And aside from Keystroke Medium, I would recommend anything by James Scott Bell on craft. Pick it up and read any book by James Scott Bell is good. Also some older guys that aren't with us anymore, Jack Bickham and Dwight V. Swain were the unofficial mentors of Jim Butcher, and whatever's good enough for him is good enough for me. So look up those people, those gentlemen. They each have a few books on writing, which are foundational, I would say, at the least. And then, just check out other writing podcasts. I've learned so much from other people and their writing podcasts. So, and then have fun when you're writing. When you actually sit down to write, have fun. Do what's going to float your boat, and not try to be somebody else.
All right. Shadow says, every part of that sentence makes me happy, Dean.
That's good, because it was a run-on sentence. So.
And Jay Clifton Slater says, love just pointers on closing the plot points.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Class act.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today and for sharing your writing experience and your tips and ideas, and sharing especially your stories with us. Where can readers and fans find you and your books?
I'm active on Facebook. If you wanted to check out my Tough Luck series and read about action adventure, urban fantasy with a YA twist in a Celtic flavored world, then you could go to bookstoread.com/toughluck. That's a pretty easy URL, bookstoread.com/toughluck. That would get you started on the series. If you wanted to check out my other short stories, you could check out the other Keystroke Medium anthologies. Very good.
Very good. To everyone in the live chat, thanks for joining us, particularly Shadow, Jay, Rick, who else? Walt was here. Who else was here?
Thanks for the support, all. Appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I had so much fun.
Yeah. All right. We're going to do another interview in a little bit, so just hang on tight and join us for more reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. Hi, guys.